All right, is our microphone working? Yes, it is. All right. Welcome to tonight's author talk, everyone, at the Historical and Genealogical Society of Indiana County. I want to point your attention to some of the display items that we have that has been graciously lent to us by both the author and some of our members and people who frequent the museum. So apart from the program itself, I want to encourage you to take a look at the items in the display cases. Plenty of bobbleheads. There might be more bobbleheads in that case than there are people in this room right now. Also, Bob has lent us a number of items behind me here. So all autographed items. He may speak to that during his talk, as well as we have a display in the back that highlights some Indiana County baseball, co-leagues, and local items. So if you're interested there, and baseball is sort of the theme tonight, so take a look at that if you're interested. But Bob Fulton has been writing for a very long time, and his new book, Burial at Home Plate, is an interesting compilation of a number of the more interesting stories that surround the Pittsburgh Pirates, things that you almost have to dig local lore regarding baseball. So Bob's going to talk to us about his new book, and then afterwards we have refreshments, some good old ballpark food. So hot dogs, which have just been freshly grilled, and our ladies have been hard at work there. It was a fun little endeavor. But without further ado, Bob, let's give you the floor and play ball.
Thank you, Jonathan. I have lots of sheets of paper here. Good evening, and thank you all for coming out to this presentation about Burial at Home Plate. I hope you'll find this program entertaining and informative. This is my fifth book and second about the Pirates. The other Pirates Treasures was published more than 20 years ago. My other books have dealt with the history of the Summer Olympics, Major League Baseball records and the stories behind them, and former IUP football coach Chuck Clausing, who is a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. Many people have asked me how long I worked on Burial at Home Plate. Actually, I spent a lifetime learning about the Pirates and their colorful history. I practically grew up at Forbes Field, where my father was an usher. I was 8 years old when he took me to my first game. His section was on the second deck, third base side, and I vividly remember him standing up, catching a foul ball, and nonchalantly handing me the ball. Later, as a sports writer for the Gazette, I covered the Pirates, and I had the opportunity, had access to many former players, as far back as Mace Brown, who came to the team in 1935. Before I begin, I'd like to provide some background about the Pirates. They played their first game, a 10-9 win over the Cincinnati Red Stockings on May 2nd, 1882. They were the Alleghenies back then. The team's ballpark was located in the city of Allegheny, which is today's north side. And they played not in the National League, but in the American Association, a second major league that launched that year. The American Association differed from the National League in that it cost half as much to attend games, 25 cents as opposed to 50, and beer and whiskey were served. So the atmosphere at American Association games was understandably a little more raucous than at National League ones. The Alleghenies played 5 seasons in the American Association before joining the National League in 1887. That's wrong there, not 1891. The National League had dropped its Kansas City franchise because many of the owners thought it was too far west, and the Pirates were only too happy to fill the void and join this more established league. What I plan to do this evening is relate some of these oddball tales included in Burial at Home Plate, one of which will explain the book's very unusual title. I included the dates of many of these items in the book because I just knew readers would doubt whether these things actually happen. I myself did on several occasions a baseball game played underwater, a dead man confirming that a controversial catch was made, a home run ball lost on the field of play. So this way, with the dates, the skeptics can look in old newspapers and actually read the accounts. If you have any questions or comments at any time, just raise your hand. And if you're interested in purchasing the book, I'll be available later. And one final thing before I start, does anyone know the significance of this jersey? The Santurce Crabbers, or Congrejeros, Roberto Clemente's first professional team in the Puerto Rican Winter League. So this is a replica that I got at the Clemente Museum. So without further ado, let me begin with the story of Lou Bierbauer and how the Alleghenies became the Pirates. I've told you about the American Association, the second major league. Well, there was a third one in 1890, the Players League. And numerous players from the National League and American Association jumped to this new league. Among them, Philadelphia Athletics second baseman Lou Bierbauer. And when the Players League folded after its only season, the players were ordered to return to their 1889 teams. But the Athletics, who played in the American Association, had inadvertently left Bierbauer off their reserve list, which bound players to their respective teams. Pittsburgh owner J. Palmer O'Neill noticed this oversight, realized Bierbauer was a free agent, and set out to sign him. It's a very interesting way it was done. On a frigid day in February of 1891, Pittsburgh manager Ned Hanlon caught a train for Bierbauer's hometown of Erie. He was living on Presque Isle, a peninsula that juts into Lake Erie, and Hanlon decided to take a shortcut across the frozen-over harbor to Bierbauer's shack, as it was described, and secured his signature on a contract to play with Pittsburgh. Well, the Athletics were outraged, and newspapers in Philadelphia called the Alleghenies Pirates for stealing Bierbauer, and thus a nickname was born. Now, the A's lodged an official protest with the Interleague Board of Arbitration, and that board decided that the Pirates had every right to sign Bierbauer. So Pittsburgh management made the nickname official in 1891, in effect, thumbing their noses at the Athletics. On a more modern note, Pirates relief pitcher Joel Hanrahan picked up his first victory of the 2009 season on July 9th while taking a nap. Stranger still, he won the game for the Washington Nationals. Hanrahan was waiting on deck in the bottom of the 11th inning on May 5th when the Nationals contest against Houston was suspended by rain with the score tied 10-10. Play was resumed 2 months later, 9 days after the Pirates acquired Hanrahan in a 4-player deal. So the Bucks were enjoying an off day in Philadelphia when the suspended game was completed at Houston's Minute Maid Park. Hanrahan played some golf in the morning and was napping when Washington pulled out an 11-10 victory. The pitcher of record, Hanrahan. He woke up to find numerous text messages congratulating him on his win. Strange that a pitcher can win a game played 1,300 miles away. Oddly enough, the Nationals' winning run was scored by Niger Morgan, one of the players Washington acquired in the Hanrahan deal. The Pirates employed a secret weapon to land pitcher Vernon Law in 1948, a box of cigars. Teams were competing fiercely for Law in that era before the amateur draft, and many dispatched scouts to the family home in Meridian, Idaho, hoping to sign this prized prospect. As Law recalled, right after graduation day, I had 9 different organizations there waiting to sign me. Each one of them would come in, and each one was coming in smoking a cigar. The scouts, they didn't make too good of an impression with my parents. Well, Jesse and Melville Law were devout Mormons, and as such abstained from alcohol and tobacco. Representatives of the Pirates were the last to enter the home that day and make their pitch. They presented Law's mother with a box of chocolates and a bouquet of roses, and notably were not puffing on cigars. That made a positive impression on Law's parents, who felt comfortable with their son casting his lot with Pittsburgh. Law would win 162 games in 16 seasons with the Pirates and become the team's first Cy Young Award winner in 1960. But he might never have signed with Pittsburgh had it not been for a bit of trickery he learned of years later. Entertainer Bing Crosby, a longtime part owner of the Pirates, visited the team's clubhouse in Los Angeles before a game and asked Law if he remembered the day scouts lined up outside his family's home. Law recalled how representatives of the Bucks were the only ones not smoking. Probably what you don't know, Crosby told him, is that they bought a box of cigars and passed them out to each of the scouts before they went in. Many of my favorite items relate to the early days of the game when things occurred that seemed to come right out of Ripley's Believe It or Not. Case in point, an 1894 game when an armed spectator helped Cincinnati win. This odd event took place on July 20th at League Park. Pirates left fielder Elmer Smith and center fielder Jake Stenzel were held up while pursuing a ball hit by Cincinnati's George Germany Smith. The game was tied 6-all in the 10th inning when Smith hit a ball that bounced into the left field bleachers, which were in play under the rules of the day. Elmer Smith hopped a fence and went into the bleachers to retrieve the ball, but a half dozen husky occupants fell on him and tried to wrestle the ball away. Stenzel raced to his rescue, but by then more fans had joined the fracas, including one who was packing a pistol. Fred Benzinger, described as a well-known citizen. Meanwhile, Germany Smith circled the bases with a game-winning home run. Are there any twins in the audience? No twins? Will McEnany and his identical twin brother Mike fooled friends, teachers, coaches, and dates by switching places during their younger days. They even fooled members of the Pirates late in the 1978 season. Will, a relief pitcher promoted from AAA Columbus, decided to play hooky on the afternoon of September 17th at Three Rivers Stadium. He asked his visiting brother to don his uniform and sit in the Pirates' bullpen during a game against Montreal so he could watch the Steelers play the Cincinnati Bengals on a clubhouse television set. According to Will, who had recorded the final out for the victorious Reds in both the 1975 and 1976 World Series, we planned it all out. We used to do things like that all the time when we were growing up. We switched classes, girlfriends, and Little League uniforms, but never got caught. And they didn't in 1978. Mike sat in the bullpen with Pirates relievers who had no idea there was an imposter in their midst. The brothers had devised the plan, and the event manager, Chuck Tanner, did call on Will to warm up. Mike would claim he had to use the bathroom before warming up, race to the clubhouse, and hand over his uniform to Will. Fortunately, the only action Mike saw that day involved a pen. He signed multiple autographs for fans, forging his brother's name, of course. Does the date May 26, 1959 ring a bell with anyone here? No? Harvey Haddix. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Harvey Haddix's incredible performance that night at Milwaukee's County Stadium. The Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph called it the greatest game ever pitched, and few would argue. Haddix retired the first 36 batters he faced and lost on the only hit he surrendered in the bottom of the 13th inning. No one in Major League history has gone as deep into a game with a no-hitter, much less a perfect game. But what makes Haddix's achievement even more amazing is something that came to light only years later. The Braves actually knew what pitches were coming. At a 30th anniversary banquet featuring many of the participants in that game, Milwaukee pitcher Bob Buell revealed that the Braves, with the aid of binoculars, were stealing catcher Smokey Burgess's signs from their outfield bullpen. If Burgess signaled for a fastball, a pitcher in the bullpen would drape a towel over his shoulder. No towel meant a breaking ball was coming. According to Buell, Harvey had such marvelous movement and changes of speed that night that it didn't even matter if the hitters knew what was coming or not. One of the stranger stories was Pittsburgh's doubleheader sweep of Brooklyn on July 4th, 1902, achieved against perhaps the most unusual backdrop in Major League history. Much of Exposition Park was underwater. Heavy rains had caused the nearby Allegheny River to overflow its banks, which left the outfield submerged in spots. Steelers founder Art Rooney, who nearly drowned in the river as a child, once said that the Allegheny would flood if you so much as spit in it. By the second half of the morning-afternoon twin bill, outfielders actually waded to their positions. According to the Pittsburgh Post, when the people entered the grounds, meaning for the morning game, nothing of a flood was visible. By and by, the water was seen to glisten between the blades of grass in right field and center field. By degrees, the water rose and formed pools. Little islands were scattered among them, and on these the center and right fielders took refuge. They were chased off these islands by the incoming flood, and by the end of the game, a smooth body of treacherous-looking water lay in center and right field and lapped the new bleachers. The doubleheader ended when Pirates center fielder Ginger Beaumont caught a fly off Bill Dolan's bat. After gloving the ball, Beaumont held the ball aloft for an instant and then plunged into the water out of sight. According to the Post account, when he emerged, he blew hard and punched his fists into his eyes like a real swimmer. Given the flooded field, you may wonder why the Pirates didn't call off the doubleheader. Owner Barney Dreyfuss anticipated a sizable holiday crowd and decided that the show must go on. That 1902 team, by the way, won 103 of 139 games and won the pennant by a ridiculous 27.5 game margin. Hall of Famer Paul Wainer was one of the greatest hitters in Pittsburgh history. He batted over 313 times between 1926 and 1940. He finished with 3,152 career hits. But Wainer not only hit baseballs, he hit the bottle. Wainer believed to be successful at the plate, he had to be relaxed. And that meant taking a shot or two of whiskey before each at bat. Pirates officials were concerned that Wainer's drinking was negatively affecting his performance on the field. So in 1938, manager Pie Traynor and team officials convinced Wainer to give up drinking. The results were disastrous. A .348 career hitter to that point, Wainer slumped while sober, finishing the year with an uncharacteristically low .280 average. The player who had led the National League in batting 3 times finished 5th that year on his team. This is how Les Biederman, who covered the Pirates for years for the Pittsburgh Press, summed up the Wainer experiment. For the benefit of those who might be curious, Paul Wainer batted .354 in 1937, the year before the drought, and batted .328 in 1939 after he resumed drinking. And there's a moral to the story somewhere. I suppose it's time to reveal the inspiration for the title of my book. It stems from perhaps the most bizarre opening day ceremony in baseball history. The date was April 30th, 1887, and the Alleghenies were celebrating their National League debut against the defending champion Chicago White Stockings, today's Cubs. A crowd of 10,000 turned out at Recreation Park, which was located only a few blocks from where PNC Park stands today. Before the game, Alleghenies catcher Fred Carroll buried his recently deceased pet monkey beneath home plate. The monkey, its name has been lost to time, accompanied Carroll everywhere. It even went on road trips and became something of a team mascot. So when it died, Carroll and his teammates arranged for the unusual pregame ceremony. It was interred beneath home plate. Since Carroll was primarily a catcher, that meant he could remain close to his companion. I grew up listening to Bob Prince on KDKA radio, and I'd like to tell you a story about what he called my most monumental, embarrassing moment as a broadcaster. In the pandemonium of the Pirates clubhouse, after their victory over the Yankees in Game 7 of the 1960 World Series, Prince abruptly dismissed Bill Mazeroski, the hero of the hour, in a nationally televised interview. He had no clue that Maz had sunk the Yankees moments before with a bottom of the ninth home run. It was the back and forth nature of the deciding game that put Prince on the spot. He and his Yankees counterpart, Mel Allen, described the action on NBC television during the series. The network decreed that the winning team's broadcaster would conduct post-game interviews from the locker room. So when Pittsburgh grabbed a 9-7 lead in the bottom of the eighth, Prince headed to the Pirates clubhouse. But upon arriving, he was told that the Yankees had tied the score and he should rejoin Allen in the broadcast booth. But before he could make his way back upstairs, a tremendous roar shook Forbes Field, indicating to Prince that the Pirates had won. He retraced his steps to the locker room, climbed atop an equipment trunk, and began his interviews. A helpful aide maneuvered Mazeroski to his side. "How does it feel to be a member of the world champions?" Prince asked. "Great," said Maz. Prince said congratulations in reply, and that was it. 2 hours later, Prince was having dinner with his wife Betty when he asked her, "How did we finally win it?" "You must be kidding," she told him. "Maz hit a home run." Said Prince, "I nearly fell off my chair." Hannes Wagner owned a mixed-breed dog named Jason Weatherby, who often accompanied his master to Forbes Field and would patiently wait in the clubhouse until the final out, with one exception. During the game against Cincinnati on May 31st, 1912, Jason Weatherby bolted onto the field in Wagner's defense and caused a ruckus. Sidelined by a leg injury, Wagner was coaching at first base that day when he objected to a call made by umpire Garnett Bush on a bang-bang play. He argued so vehemently that plate umpire Bill Clem ejected him. According to Ronald T. Waldo in Hannes Wagner and his Pittsburgh Pirates, Scenes from a Golden Era, when Wagner returned to the Pittsburgh locker room, Jason Weatherby wagged his tail and seemed to demand a reason for why Wagner had come into the clubhouse before the baseball game, while the baseball game was still in progress. When Wagner pointed to the umpire from the door of the locker room, Jason Weatherby bolted onto the field, voicing his opinion to the man who had ejected his master. According to Waldo, even Clem, who feared no ball player in the National League, cringed when Wagner's dog growled. Arthur D. Hittner in Hannes Wagner, The Life and Times of Baseball's Flying Dutchman, noted that National League President Thomas Lynch fined Wagner $25 for the incident, before adding tongue-in-cheek that it was uncertain whether the fine related to Wagner's protest or his canine's conduct. During the 2001 season, Pirates manager Lloyd McClendon, in comical fashion, disproved the notion that you can't steal first base. Angered by umpire Rick Reed's calls on two close plays at first base during a June 26 game against Milwaukee at PNC Park, McClendon disgustedly yanked the bag from its moorings after the second bad call, tucked it under his arm, and stomped off the field. Said McClendon, "I told him he wasn't seeing it, so I might as well take it." What Robert Dvorak of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette called the eruption of Mount McClendon took place after Jason Kendall was called out on a bang-bang play in the seventh inning. Kendall and first base coach Tommy Sant protested the call, but they were called off by McClendon, who bolted from the dugout and lit into Reed. When Reed ejected him, McClendon plucked the first base bag from the ground and marched off the diamond as the crowd at PNC Park gave him a standing ovation. Said Sant, "The toughest part of my job was not laughing. I was supposed to be mad." In a postscript, when McClendon returned to Pittsburgh a decade later as a member of the Detroit Tigers coaching staff, he found that his stolen base was still displayed in the Pirates clubhouse. When asked to sign it, he happily complied. This is a tale about a hidden ball trick, but not your typical hidden ball trick. This is about the 1890 Alleghenies, who finished 23-113, setting what was at the time a major league record for losses. They were a terrible team and a lousy draw at home. 17 people showed up for one game. So management looked to other sites where more than a handful of spectators might show up. And on September 22nd, they played a game against the New York Giants in Wheeling, West Virginia. The highlight of the Giants' 8-3 victory might have been a comical inside-the-park home run hit by center fielder Mike Tiernan. He circled the bases in the ninth inning while the Pittsburgh fielders frantically searched for the baseball in what the Wheeling Daily Register termed the profuse vegetation at Island grounds, situated on Wheeling Island in the middle of the Ohio River. According to the Daily Register, the game was played under some slight disadvantages, as the outfield was unkempt and unshaven, the grass being so tall that the ball and almost the players frequently got lost. Tiernan knocked one into the tall grass, and while some 7 or 8 players were still on the hunt, he modestly crossed the home plate. I titled this item, Sleeping Beauty. The Brooklyn Dodgers battered Pirates pitcher Joe Sullivan in a 9-0 victory at Forbes Field on August 19, 1941. So he sought solace with a bottle. He showed up drunk for the next day's game and hid out from his manager and coaches in the bullpen before curling up inside one of the shells used for the tarp and falling fast asleep. Sullivan was eventually located, but manager Frankie Frisch declined to disturb his slumber until the game was over. Another Pirates loss. Les Biederman of the Pittsburgh Press wrote that the fact that Sullivan slept through yesterday's fiasco indicates he isn't as dumb as some persons think. Sullivan was suspended for 10 days and fined $200 for what in one newspaper account delicately termed breaking training. Are there any questions at this point about anything? Anything about the Pirates? No? Yeah, ask me a question, Jake.
I'm sorry, not to me. Did anybody ever play for the Pirates with Indiana connection?
Not with the Pirates. There have been some played for other major league teams.
Yeah.
He never played for the Pirates, did he?
Yeah, he did. Oh, spring training.
Spring training. I was in Mike Ryan's house once doing an interview, and he played me a tape. He played winter league ball in Venezuela.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
Okay, and there was a young lady interviewing him after the game because he had hit a home run. She was speaking Spanish. He did not speak Spanish, so it was an interesting interview. Nutritionists no doubt cringe, but what Rennie Stennett consumed as a pregame meal on September 16, 1975, fueled a record assault. The Pirates' second baseman ate 2 full-size York peppermint patties for breakfast prior to an afternoon contest against the Cubs at Wrigley Field. He then put on a show so spectacular that even Chicago fans were applauding. Stennett went 7 for 7 in a 22-0 rout to set a modern major league record and equaled another by twice banging out 2 hits in 1 inning. He doubled off starter Rick Russell and singled off ex-teammate Tom DeTore in the Bucs' 9-run first, then doubled off DeTore and singled off Oscar Zamora as Pittsburgh scored 6 times in the 5th. He also singled in the 3rd, singled in the 7th, and tripled in the 8th. At that point, Danny Murtaugh sent in a pinch runner for Stennett, who received a standing ovation from Cubs fans as he trotted to the dugout. Stennett had an inkling that he was destined to have a special day. The first time up, he said, I hit a ball between first baseman Andre Thornton and the bag, and in my mind, that told me that day I was going to do good. Because as a right-handed hitter and I'm hitting the ball to the right side, I know I'm hitting good. That was a shot and it triggered something. I felt all I had to do was make contact and I was going to get a hit. He did 7 times over. The only other 7-hit performance in a 9-inning game occurred on June 10, 1892, when Baltimore catcher Wilbert Robinson, a future Hall of Famer, went 7 for 7 against St. Louis. Anybody know who the Pirates' first home run champion was? They've only had 3. The first one stood 5, 6.5 and weighed 150 pounds. In 1902, Tommy Leach led the National League in homers without once hitting a ball over the fence. He had a grand total of 6 homers for the National League champs, the fewest by a league leader in modern Major League history. Each of them was an inside-the-park blow. Often referred to as wee Tommy Leach, the Pirates' third baseman had plenty of speed and took advantage of Exposition Park's vast expanses. Its dimensions were 400 feet down the lines and 450 to center. So hitting balls over the fences was a rarity. In fact, Brooklyn first baseman Tim Jordan drew gasps when he homered at Exposition Park on July 22, 1908, because it was the first over-the-fence homer hit there in 9 years. By the way, of Leach's 63 career home runs, a National League record 49 were of the inside-the-park variety. Only Hall of Famer Jesse Burkett hit more inside-the-park homers, 55. Leach never slugged more than 7 home runs in any one season. Shortstop Frankie Zach earned a dubious place in Pirates history on April 17, 1945, when he cost his team an opening day victory because of an untied shoelace. Zach was standing on first base and Al Lopez was perched on second in the 5th inning as Cincinnati's Bucky Walters prepared to pitch to Jim Russell. Zach asked for time when he noticed his right lace undone. Umpire Ziggy Sears began shouting and waving his arms frantically, but Walters, Russell, and plate umpire George Barr didn't notice. Walters delivered the pitch, and Russell blasted it over the right field wall at Crosley Field for an apparent 3-run homer to give the Pirates a 4-0 lead. Unfortunately, it didn't count because Zach had called time. The Reds went on to a 7-6 victory. The next day, Pirates manager Frankie Frisch received a telegram from former New York Giants teammate Casey Stengel, who was then managing the New York Yankees farm club in Kansas City. It read, "Am rushing a pair of button shoes for Zach." Casey played for the Pirates for a few years. During the 1951 season, handsome bachelor Ralph Kiner, the Pirates left fielder and home run champion, picked up a pretty girl in a most unusual place, the batting cage at Forbes Field. This was no ordinary pretty girl. The object of Kiner's attention was Hollywood starlet Janet Leigh. Leigh was in Pittsburgh for the filming of Angels in the Outfield, which chronicled the transformation of the woebegone Pirates into champions with some heavenly assistance. Paul Douglas starred as the foul-mouthed, hard-headed manager who leads his inept players to a pennant with the help of unseen angels. Leigh portrayed a local newspaper reporter. Leigh was often seen on the field as the Pirates took batting practice. So one day, Kiner approached her, asked her out to dinner, and she accepted. They dated for about 3 weeks. It was serious, at least on my side, Kiner wrote in his biography, and I thought there was a good chance it would continue. But when word of their fling reached Tony Curtis, who had been dating Leigh and was out of the country filming a movie, he rushed back to the United States, and he and Leigh soon announced their engagement. There's a humorous postscript to the brief Kiner-Leigh romance. More than 30 years later, Kiner found himself in the same room as Leigh's actress daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis. He approached her and introduced himself and told her how he had dated her mother long ago. "I expected her to look at me with puzzlement," Kiner recalled in his biography. "Instead, she leaped to her feet, threw her arms around me and exclaimed, 'Daddy, I've been searching for you all my life.'" It was a rare instance of Connor being rendered speechless. Washington right fielder Sam Rice confirmed he did indeed make a controversial catch against the Pirates in the 1925 World Series from the hereafter. The truth of one of the most disputed plays in series history hung on the words of a dead man. The Senators led 4-3 in the eighth inning of Game 3 when Pirates catcher Earl Smith drove a pitch to deep right center at Griffith Stadium. Rice leaped for the ball at the temporary bleachers constructed for the series, tumbled over the 4-foot barrier, and disappeared into the crowd. Did he catch the ball or not? Center fielder Earl McNeely had obstructed second base umpire Cy Rigler's view, so when Rice emerged with the ball in his mitt, the call was out. But one Senators fan, nearly 50 years later, insisted that Rice had dropped the ball as he fell into the seats before he or someone else placed it back in his glove. Many others doubted he made the catch. Asked many times in later years if he had caught the ball, Rice would invariably answer, "The umpire said I did." Only after his death did Rice address the subject. 3 weeks after his passing, Hall of Fame President Paul Kerr opened an envelope containing a letter written by Rice 2 years before. He recounted the play in detail before closing with these words, "At no time did I lose possession of the ball." I'm not saying he ever had possession. On October 4th, 1908, a crowd of more than 50,000 gathered in Pittsburgh for a Pirates game that was played nearly 500 miles away in Chicago. A pennant was hanging in the balance when the Bucks opposed the Cubs in their season finale at Westside Park. The National League race had gone down to the wire. The Pirates were 98-55, a half game ahead of the Cubs, and the Giants, who had some makeup games to play, were also in contention. But a Pittsburgh win would clinch at least a tie for the league title. Now you have to remember this was an age before radio and television, so to get up-to-the-date information from important road games, fans would gather outside of newspaper offices. The play-by-play of games would be transmitted via telegraph, and that information relayed to men with megaphones, who would then provide updates to the fans. A huge throng jammed downtown Pittsburgh on October 4th, bringing vehicle traffic to a standstill. According to the Pittsburgh Gazette-Times, rocking and rolling like a wave, great masses of people took undisputed possession of the streets and only permitted cars to pass when police clubbed a hole through the living mass. Those fans went home disappointed. The Cubs won the game 5-2 and eventually took the pennant by beating the Giants on October 8th. Bobby Bragan might be the only Major League manager to suffer a hangover from a half-pint carton of orange drink. Bragan's on-field escapade with a beverage in 1957 cost him $100 and ultimately his job. In the fifth inning of a July 31st game at Milwaukee's County Stadium that the Pirates would lose 4-2, Bragan got into a dispute with umpire Stan Landis. After Landis ruled against the Pirates on an appeal play at second base, Bragan came onto the field holding his nose, indicating he thought the call stunk. Landis immediately ejected him. After leaving the field, Bragan ordered Coach Danny Murtaugh to get him a hot dog and an orange drink from vendors near the dugout. Murtaugh managed to get the orange drink with a straw in it, and Bragan returned to the diamond and offered a sip to each of the umpires in turn. The crowd was howling with laughter, but others didn't see the humor in Bragan's antics. National League President Warren Giles fined him $100. A few days later, General Manager Joe L. Brown fired Bragan. Asked later about the orange drink incident, Bragan said, "My only regret was that the hot dog didn't arrive in time." As we saw earlier, a Cincinnati fan with a gun helped his team win a game. On May 3rd, 1899, an unarmed Pirates fan helped his team win. A small boy, described by the Pittsburgh Press as brave and loyal, helped the Pirates beat Louisville at Exposition Park. According to the Pittsburgh Commercial Gazette, the finish was the most remarkable ever seen on the grounds. The Colonels were one out from a 6-4 victory when the unidentified youngster aided the Pirates' cause. He was standing at the right field bleachers fence when Jack McCarthy hit a ball down the right field line. As the ball skipped toward him, the lad opened the gate through which the Pirates passed en route to their locker room and then closed it, creating a roadblock for Louisville right fielder Charlie Dexter. According to the press, the excited Dexter fumbled with the latch for a few seconds, then got into the small garden which surrounds the clubhouse and instituted a search for the boy and the ball, but neither could be found. So McCarthy was able to circle the bases with a game-tying 2-run homer. To make matters worse for the Colonels, the very next batter, Tom McCreary, hit a home run of his own to win the game. Unlike McCarthy's, his did not require any special assistance. Larry French of the Pirates reversed the usual sequence during a July 12, 1933 game against Boston at Forbes Field. While pitchers typically are sent from the mound to the showers, French went from the showers to the mound, and he wound up winning the game. French didn't figure to pitch that day with the Bucks leading 8-0 after 8 innings, so he decided to sneak off to the locker room and get an early start in his shower, but his plan backfired. When the Braves mounted a furious rally, manager George Gibson called the bullpen and ordered French to warm up, but he couldn't be found. A clubhouse boy finally located him in the shower and told him he was needed in the bullpen, pronto. French didn't believe the lad and continued showering. A teammate soon appeared and pleaded with French to hurry. "Forget about the bullpen, Larry," he said. "You've got to get on the diamond." By the time French toweled off, threw his uniform back on, and entered the game, Boston had sliced the lead to 8-7 and had a runner on third with 1 out. French yielded a game-tying sacrifice fly to the first batter he faced, but he wound up winning the game when Archie Vaughan tripled home Pie Traynor in the 10th for a 9-8 victory. Only then was French able to return to the clubhouse and finish his shower in peace. This is one of those unbelievable stories. Pirates pitcher Marty O'Toole was forced to exit a 1912 game against Philadelphia for an unusual reason, an inflamed tongue, the result of some mischief perpetrated by the Phillies. O'Toole, who fed batters a steady diet of spitballs, disgusted opponents with a distasteful pre-pitch routine. He would hide the ball in his glove, bring it to his face, and then lick it. Philadelphia first baseman Fred Luderus countered this offensive practice by stashing a tube of fiery liniment in his pocket and dabbing some at the ball at every opportunity. But back then, a single baseball might last for several innings. Before long, O'Toole's distress was so profound he was compelled to leave the game. Pittsburgh manager Fred Clark approached the umpires and protested Luderus's actions. But Phil's manager, Red Doohan, insisted the liniment was simply a safeguard. "That ball may be carrying the germs of any one of many contagious diseases," he told the umpires. "So we put disinfectant on it whenever we face a spitball pitcher like O'Toole. I do not see how we can be refused the privilege of protecting ourselves." The umpires agreed. We just had this anniversary. When the Houston Astrodome opened in April of 1965, team officials boasted that the game would never be postponed by rain there. But on June 15th, 1976, the seemingly impossible occurred. A deluge forced the Astros to call off a game against the Pirates. Never before had an indoor game been postponed because of weather. Said Pirates third baseman Richie Hebner years later, "I tell people I got rained out in the Astrodome, and they look at me like I got 3 eyeballs." More than 10 inches of rain fell in 7 hours, which caused extensive flooding and paralyzed the city. Both teams were able to reach the ballpark, but conditions soon worsened and most stadium workers and fans were unable to get there. The umpires tried to drive to the Astrodome, but their car stalled in the high water, and they had to wade back to their hotel. Astros officials called off the game at 6:45 p.m., about 45 minutes before the scheduled first pitch. What happened next was nearly as surreal as an indoor rainout. Instead of playing baseball, the teams enjoyed a feast right there on the field. According to Astros historian Mike Acosta, concession workers set up buffet and tables behind second base, and both teams ate dinner on the field together. The players were in uniforms, but some of them were wearing shower flip-flops on their feet. The Astrodome staff ate with the players as well. The 20 or so fans who had braved the elements to reach the ballpark were issued rain checks, an item builders of the Astrodome never imagined would be needed. Because Vernon Law refused to come out of a July 19, 1955 game against Milwaukee, Vanita Law refused to come out of her bathtub. Law worked 18 innings for naught that night at Forbes Field, winding up with a tired arm and a no decision. The Bucks rallied in the 19th to make a winner of Bob Friend. Law wasn't even supposed to pitch that night. Scheduled starter Ronnie Klein begged off with a sore shoulder, so Law, on 3 days' rest, took the mound. Manager Fred Haney promised to take him out at the first sign of fatigue, but Law declined to come out, and so did Vanita, who remained in the tub as the game wore on. My wife didn't know I was going to pitch, so she stayed home with the kids, Law recalled. She put them to bed and decided to take a bath while she listened to the game. After 12 innings, the score was still tied, and Vanita didn't want to jinx me by getting out of the tub, so she stayed in. After 18 innings, Fred said, "That's enough, Vern." He wouldn't let me go any longer. So Vanita finally got out of the tub. When I got home, Vanita's skin was still wrinkled from being in the tub for so long. Pitchers nowadays hardly go 6 innings. He went 18. Poor Doe Boylan, he finally gets to the major leagues, and in his first big league at bat, he strikes out, even though he was seated on the bench at the time. Pirates manager Chuck Tanner called on the rookie first baseman, the left-handed batter, to pinch hit against Skip Lockwood, a right-hander, in the 7th inning of a September 4th, 1978 game at Three Rivers Stadium. But when Lockwood injured his arm after the third pitch, Mets manager Joe Torre, playing the percentages, summoned a left-hander. Tanner responded by replacing Boylan with right-handed hitter Rennie Stennett, who inherited a 1-2 count. Stennett whiffed, but under the rules of scoring, Boylan was charged with a strikeout since he was in the batter's box for 2 of the 3 strikes. Said Boylan, "For many years, I dreamed of what I might do in my first major league at bat. I dreamed of hitting a grand slam homer and even of striking out, but I never thought I'd strike out and be watching from the dugout." The Pirates game against the New York Giants on June 18, 1941, 83 years ago today, was held up for 56 minutes by a fight, a boxing match actually. Billy Conn, the Pittsburgh Kid, challenged champion Joe Louis that night for the heavyweight title of the world at New York's Polo Grounds, leading to what John Drebinger of the New York Times called an extraordinary double feature. The baseball game at Forbes Field was halted in the 4th inning so the fans could listen to a broadcast of the Conn-Lewis bout over the ballpark's loudspeakers. Conn, who had fought several times at Forbes Field, was leading on points after 12 rounds, got a little cocky, and went for a knockout in the 13th. Lewis took advantage of an opening, delivered a telling blow, and dropped Conn to the canvas. The Pirates and Giants then resumed the baseball game. My final item is from 1902. The Chicago Tribune once labeled Cubs pitcher Jimmy St. Vrain the poorest hitter in the league. His utility at the plate inspired a slapstick sequence during an April 27th game against the Pirates at West Side Park. After striking out twice, Chicago manager Frank Seeley jokingly suggested to the right-handed hitting St. Vrain that he might have better luck turning around and batting from the opposite side. St. Vrain assumed that Seeley was serious and stepped in against Deacon Philippi as a left-hander. He then stunned everyone, but mostly himself, by making contact. That's when St. Vrain really got turned around. Cubs outfielder Davy Jones recalled the moment years later for author Lawrence Ritter in The Glory of Their Times. He tapped a slow roller to Hannes Wagner at shortstop and took off as fast as he could go. But instead of running into first base, he headed for third. Oh my God, what bedlam! Everybody yelling and screaming at poor Jimmy as he raced to third base, head down, spikes flying, determined to get there ahead of the throw. Even the Pirates were confused. After fielding the grounder, Wagner was momentarily frozen by the sight of St. Vrain dashing madly in the wrong direction. I'm standing there with the ball in my hand looking at this guy running from home to third, Wagner recalled, and for an instant there, I swear, I didn't know where to throw the damn ball. That concludes my program, and I thank the Historical Society for having me. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No?
Did they find the bunch of photos after they...
I don't know that anyone looked. I don't know when this story came to light either. Maybe it came to light in later years and, monkey bones, who knows how long they'd last.
What year did they quit calling the Allegheny?
They signed Lou Bierbauer, they went to sign him in February of 1891, so it was that year. So 1890 was the last year for the Alleghenies. And I think because the Alleghenies were so atrocious, it's probably a good idea to give them a different name. Yeah.
You get to many games now and you still follow the Pirates?
Let me confess, any baseball games we go to is usually the Altoona Curve. Much easier to get to the games, much cheaper. Going to Pirates games can be stressful. We haven't been there in a number of years, to be honest.
Is there any story connected to why they called them Pirates?
Because they pirated the player from Philadelphia. Yes?
Who did they call the Steelers? S-T-E-A-L-E-R-S?
No, actually, the Steelers came into being in 1933 as the Pirates because many NFL teams, Cincinnati Reds, Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Giants, they named the teams after the baseball team because NFL football wasn't very popular. And so they sort of wanted to, ride on the coattails of the baseball team. So in 1940, Art Rooney decided to have a name the team contest.
I thought I read somewhere the Pirates, before they were popular, the Pirates were called the Steelers because they stole something, I guess.
No. And the Pirates, the Steelers story in 1940, when they had a contest, Art Rooney had a contest, and there were, I think, 21 people submitted Steelers as the nickname, and they won season tickets. And one of the season ticket winners, the only woman, ended up marrying the ticket manager. They met that day, and he was taken with her. Anything else? I don't know. They've had many colors down through the years, and then they had red for a while. In fact, they brought red back for a while. But I don't know about black and gold, whether they just took after the Steelers. Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right, so I know that the tales that Bob shared tonight only scratched the surface on what's in his book. So Bob has a couple of copies here for sale, I would imagine. So we have a table set up for him over here if you're interested in buying the book. Also, we have some ballpark food for refreshments. We have the hot dogs and other items over here, and then the drinks are just around the corner over here. So thank you for joining us tonight. Take a look at some of the exhibits, and have a good evening. Thank you.